So from 210 right the way through to 221. Would anyone be willing to read for that? Joe, thank you so much. 210 to 221. Thank you. I can do it. Some of you might remember Louise, not Marchant. There was a Louise who came here, and her teacher asked her to request the High Lamas in south of France to give further teachings. So she said yes, and then he said that he had to give it, and she had to request in the voice of Kermit using a glove puppet. So good for her, she did. Okay, please, thank you. Okay, so please, in your own voice. And you have to hold the microphone quite close to your mouth, I think. And is it on? Just... Cool. Has it got writing in the little window? Okay, cool, go with it. You have to hold it close.
To those who listen to the vacant chambers, brilliantly sparkling crystal walls and exquisite pillars of layered gems, having candles above the glow of flowers. I beseech the daughters and their children to come and bathe their bodies abundantly, from many jeweled vases filled with waters scented and enticing, to the accompaniment of song and music. Let me dry their bodies with comfortable cloths, clean and well-anointed with scent, and then may I present them with fragrant, well-dyed garments. Mindful of things and self-control. I adorn with hundreds of this and that supreme ornaments, Aries, Shantideva, Kosha, Bodhisattva, and so forth. Like polishing pure, refined gold, I anoint the bodies of the lords of spheres that blaze with light, with the choicest perfumes whose fragrance permeates throughout the living world. And to the highest objects of giving, the lords of spheres, I offer all enchanting, sweet-smelling flowers, such as mandala, lotus, and ductala, and beautiful, well-arranged flowers. I also offer clouds of incense, whose pervasive sweet aroma steals away the mind. I offer to them the delicacies of the gods and a variety of foods and drinks too. I also offer them jeweled lamps, arranged on golden lotus pots. Upon ground anointed with incense, I scatter loose, pleasing flowers. To those who have the nature of compassion, I offer a nest of palaces, resounding with melodious praises, beautified by and blazing with hanging ornaments of gems and pearls that adorn the infinite space. Eternally shall I offer to the lords of spheres jeweled parasols with golden handles, and pleasing ornaments embellishing the rings, standing upright, their shapes beautiful to behold. Besides those, many make collections of offerings resounding with sweet, pleasing music, clouds that appease the suffering of sentient beings, remain individually.
One more.
May a rain of flowers and gems descend continuously from all the Dharma trees and upon the reliquaries of holy images.
Thank you. Thank you. So, this is the origin text, if you like, for the practice called offering a bathhouse to the Buddhas, which is quite common across the traditions in Tibetan Buddhism. And sometimes you see that the Lama has a kind of a round, polished piece of metal, a mirror, and they mark 2 lines down, 2 lines across, and that's to symbolize the beams holding up the bathhouse roof and the 4 pillars that run underneath that. So they're basing that image on a mandala house. You know, if you have a visualized image of a mandala house, it has 4 walls and then 4 pillars and then 4 big beams that hold the roof up, and then within that But we need to be creative in the way we do these things. So it's what we find beautiful. And we can create something in our own minds that's beautiful. The beautiful bathhouse with, if you see some of in Korean art and also some Chinese art, there's still these little small things that must have been put on altars, I guess, where you have the little house, but it's made entirely of jewels, gold, silver, rubies, pearls. I mean, just extraordinary, exquisite things. But some things we have in our own tradition in the West, which are much the same. So if you look at this, where are we? 210, to very sweetly scented bathing chambers with brilliantly sparkling crystal floors and exquisite pillars ablaze with gems, having canopies above aglow with pearls. These canopies above glowing with pearls, in early medieval art, before the Gothic period, if you like, that when you had, they built a sort of four square, you had four pillars and then a curve arch thing and a sort of dome over the top, and you would put the main crucifix in there. And on the inside, you can see in the paintings, none of them survive now, you would have dark blue velvet with pearls hanging off to give this impression of a starry night. And so if you imagine you've got candlelight and that's bouncing off the pearls against this, I mean, that's the kind of thing you need to be thinking about. So the light of jewels, you know, I think they still talk about jewels having light within them, but that shiny and bright quality. And so, I don't know about you, but I don't have many jewels in my world. So occasionally I'll go down somewhere like Bond Street and peer in the window at Garrard's when you have beautiful sapphires and rubies and emeralds and kind of add them into my kind of mental box of things to offer, because they are exquisite. I mean, I remember one time I went to a wedding of a friend and they knew an Indian princess who was terribly good fun and very good value, but she turned up and just had exquisite ruby earrings. And maybe it's because I've done art history or something, I just became fixated by her ears. You know, don't look at her ears, stop it, you know. But they were just beautiful. If you, also you can see it in Anglo-Saxon art in England, that when you get garnet and you split it so that it's quite thin, garnet is a red material, but it's also see-through to some extent. If you then put kind of like crinkled gold leaf underneath it, then the light passes through, bounces back off the gold and kind of sparkles out of the jewel itself. So they knew a thing or two in the old days, and they probably still have things done at the high end of the market that, you know, I would never see. But that's when you're doing these kind of things, just what is very beautiful, elegant light. I mean, we'll use this meditation at the end to play with. But please think about that. It's like if you go to Delhi and you go to the Red Fort, there's, as you probably know, the Red Fort was the one of the palaces of the Maharaj, and on the top level there was a kind of one-story palace all the way around. And then when the Brits came in, they destroyed the palace and put in barracks, as you do. But they left a couple of things. They left one bit where you can see where the throne would have been. The throne had already been stolen by that stage. They'd had a fight with the Persians, and the Persians took this peacock throne back. It's in the vault of the bank in Tehran. So the Raja would sit on this silver bejeweled peacock throne with it kind of you imagine the kind of spray of the peacock feathers behind, but in silver behind him, and he would sit on a raised platform so that somebody like me, my head would be kind of just at the level of his feet, and everyone else's. And the Raja would only all of his palace was at that level. Ordinary people, you kind of moved around on a completely different level. So in one part, you'll see that the bathhouse is still there. So it's got this lattice. You know that in India they have this ability to take stone and carve it in a kind of lattice work so that the light comes through. So you can't go in, but if you peer through, you'll see there's an enormous block of some green kind of stone, like serpentine or something like that. Huge, big, and that's the bath that the Raja would get into, the Shah would get into. And on the outside, there's intricate designs of jewels and then tendrils and all the way across in rubies and just, it's extraordinary work. And you think that was his bath. It's like, that's just amazing things. So you can add in all these things that you find beautiful and amazing and just, create and enjoy.
Mike, did you say the bath is still there?
The bath is still there. There's a kind of bath. The bathhouse is still there. So, and it's got this, presumably because it was so hot most of the time, it's got this lattice work around it. You can't get into the bathhouse, but if you look through, you can see this great block, and you can see the stonework on it. In the same way, but it's Mughal jewelry. It's kind of, the jewels are proud. They stand out from the material, so it's like that. It's not like the Taj. If you go to the Taj, everything is inset into but also it's also extremely beautiful as well. But so you can play with these things, because the.
People spend extraordinary amounts of bathrooms now.
But just extraordinary things, and because I had a friend who was being a little bit rude, but Tibetans, a lot of them, you were washed when you were born and you were washed when you died, and that was it. So he often said, I wonder what they really imagine when they're doing the bathhouse offering. But they did have hot springs in old Tibet, and they still do actually, and because it helps with rheumatics and things like that.
I always assumed that part of the stress on bathhouses was because having a bath would be such an extraordinary experience. It's sort of visualizing something that would never happen to you, that was just on another plane.
Possibly, yeah. But also there's the offering of the bath is seen as a purification practice. So it's not just about offering, it's the idea that by pouring the waters over the Buddhas, we kind of remove the obscurations in ourself that block us from seeing the Buddhas. So there's that quality of although you're offering water to them, or the goddesses are offering water, pouring it over them, somehow that's wiping away the things, washing away the things that block us from seeing reality as it is, from seeing the Buddhas as they are. So there's a kind of double side. And again with verse 15, to the highest objects of giving, the Lord of subduers, I offer all enchanting, sweet-smelling flowers, such as mandara, lotus, and uppala, as well as beautiful, well-arranged garlands. India is the land of garlands. They can make garlands, they can whip them up in no time at all. But uppala are supposedly flowers that open in moonlight. The uppala is a kind of night lotus or something like that. And it's now very rare for many reasons, one being pollution. But the uppala opens in moonlight. And there are occasionally other flowers around the world that do that. And lotuses, as we've seen, you can see them in quite a lot of places, but you also have this thing of, as the bloom opens, that's when the smell is released. By the time it's like that, it's gone. So it's just the initial burst. And in our culture, some roses do the same kind of thing. On the initial opening of the bud, there's this tremendous burst of perfume, and then it disappears, it dissipates out. So all these things that, again, it doesn't have to be perfume from flowers. It can be the smells that we like, the fine smells that we like. And if that means, commercially made perfume, that's fine. It's just whatever is beautiful, uplifting. Then this thing about offering in 2013, adorning the bodhisattvas, the Buddhas and bodhisattvas, Samantabhadra, Manjughosha, Avalokiteshvara, and so forth. So Samantabhadra and Manjughosha get specific mention because of this. Samantabhadra's offering is this way of offering, light, offering at the end, more light, offering at the end, and also visualizing yourself with many bodies and many heads and many tongues and many eyes and many arms, doing all the offering practices, the prostration and the saying of the praises. The Manjughosha is Manjushri, so again, it's still bringing in the three circles, the wisdom aspect, the emptiness aspect. So the pair of them, although they're beings, if you like, it's actually referring back to this extensive offering practice, but being aware all the time that it's a dependent arising, it's empty, there's no substance locking things there. And Avalokiteshvara, obviously, because of compassion. That compassion is the kind of driver of Mahayana Buddhism, of this kind of Buddhism. Without it, we wouldn't know about this at all. But similarly, without great compassion, which is Avalokiteshvara, Avalokiteshvara is the kind of shape that we go, oh, look, there's Avalokiteshvara. What does it remind us of? Great compassion. Without that great compassion for all beings, then bodhicitta doesn't happen. As long as we have that all beings but not them, then it's not going to happen in us. So then we move on to clouds of incense. Now, some people, again, you're offering smell. So incense is one kind of good smell. Some of my friends don't like the smell of incense. It's okay. You don't have to offer what you don't like. If you like the smell of incense, that's fine. Often, and different incenses can be interesting, let's put it that way. A friend of mine says that all Tibetan incense smells basically of old cardboard. And also sometimes, when it's been a bit overdone and you walk into the room and it's kind of like that. So it's what you find pleasant, that faint smell of incense that you get. And in Tibetan monasteries, I noticed in Tibet proper, they have a big wooden box. We have the tiny wee thing. They have a big wooden box with a deep drawer, and they've just got one incense stick burning on a bed of ash. So there's just a hint of it in the air. It's like those drinks that go, a hint of rose or something in it. But it's just a hint. It's not kind of like clouds of stuff that you can't breathe in. But also, if you see the morning rituals around some of the big temples in Tibetan culture, they have these huge braziers and they're burning juniper all over the place. And also, I find that nice. I like that. But again, it's what pleases you. Jeweled lamps. Again, you're offering light. So whatever lights are good, whatever lights work for you. I think Alison might have been director at that stage, but one time Rinpoche stayed in one of the students' houses in North London, and he was into offering, lots of Christmas light type things, and people said that his room was just unbearably hot because there was so many of them in there. It was just baking. But again, it's that offering of light, and whatever pleases you. Again, there's we were having a friend of mine has just come back from Burma and said it's incredible, just absolutely adored it. But the one thing that drove her up the wall was you go into the temple and you have a really ancient Buddha statue, gilt, beautiful, and then behind there's this aureole of light going and she just said, you can't look at the Buddha's face because it's like so whatever pleases you, Similarly, I don't know about the filming now, but when we started filming, we could never make it focus on Geshe-tashi, and then we realized it was because we had the lights on flickering, and it was just focusing on the flicker of the lights rather than Geshe-tashi. And then inestimable palaces is is the way of translating these mandala houses that we have as the kind of standard cultural thing with the 4 pillars and the 4 beams and the walls. And there, the hanging ornaments, you have, it's a very standard shape. You have, it's 16 units high, like that. And so at the bottom level, you have a kind of raised ledge, which is red, and it's 2 of these units high. It's all done as a proportionality thing, so it can be tiny, but everything's in proportion. And then at the very top of the building, you have another kind of highly decorative layer, again, 2 of these high, and above that you have Makara sea monsters with jewels hanging from their mouths and great swathes of pearls hanging from their mouths and drips of pearls coming down on strings. It's, again, whatever is beautiful, whatever you want, but think of it very much in terms of jewel-like. You know, they have these elaborate, within this kind of band, if you like, you have an elaborate set of little pillars, and then a kind of broad band of gold, and another little pillar standing up, another broad band of gold, and then within that you have like red coral and pearl and silver and amber and things like that as part of the little column. You know, so when you do the medicine Buddha puja and it says one of them is the coral colored, it's red, it's not white. We always see coral when it's dead. But when you get red coral, it's a beautiful red, rich red color. But of course now it's very rare because people have overfished it and damaged it. So it's actually on the CITES list and you shouldn't be trading and stuff. So anyone who has red coral, it's very precious now. But again, everything that's beautiful, everything that's gorgeous. And then 220. Besides those, make collections of offerings resounding with sweet, pleasing music. Clouds that appease the suffering of sentient beings. Remain individually. Remain individually is a way of translating a phrase that means, although the whole of your vision, if you've got the visualization going strongly, there's loads of stuff everywhere, but they kind of interpenetrate. They don't block each other. So there's lots of stuff happening, lots of beautiful things being offered, but they're almost as if made of light, and they don't block each other. So they can have one on top of the other or one through each other. You have this whole mass of stuff, and that's reflecting back to a sutra called Avatamsaka Sutra, Palpo Che in Tibetan, which does this kind of offering. They call it net of Brahma or something. Each a net with jewels hanging at the interstices between the various parts of the net, and each jewel reflects all the other jewels. So you have this kind of Indra's net. Yes, sometimes it's used to be something that's binding us to samsara, but also it's this thing of something that is so wonderful, just extraordinary. But each jewel reflects the other jewel, and they're all, that kind of, it's sparkly, big time. So, and then again, that sense of rains of flowers is a very common image you have of many flowers coming down. We have the tradition, now we do confetti, but in the West, we throw flower petals over people at weddings and at people if you've got small kids and doing that kind of stuff. But again, it's that thing of rains of flowers, and also the sense that also is bringing down perfume as well. So that kind of beautiful smell. Okay, so then next block. So from 22 to 26, please, would somebody read that out? Steve, it looks like Joe has decided, oh no, it's going over to Tony. Right, excellent, good. Well done, thank you very much.
From where to where?
So 22 to 26. So just before we start confession, is it on? Down at the bottom there's a button and you should start to see writing in the little. Is it? Tap it. Hold it close and tap it, just make sure. No.
Does it have the word light? Let's turn it off.
Oh well, go for it. Speak loudly. Project your voice to the back of the theatre. That's it, good.
22, okay. In the same way as Manjughosha and so forth have made offerings to the victors, similarly do I bestow gifts upon the Tathagatas, the protectors, as well as their children. I eulogize the oceans of excellent qualities, with oceans of branches and melodious praise. May those clouds of pleasant eulogy certainly arise always to them everywhere. With bodies as numerous as all the atoms within the field, I bow with my body to all Buddhas of the three times, the Dharma and the Supreme Community. I pay homage to the basis of the mind of enlightenment, to all supports of offering, to all abbots and masters, and to all the holders of supreme conduct. Until the essence of enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddhas. Likewise, I go for refuge to the Dharma and to the assembly of Bodhisattvas.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I have a question for you. Verse 24, does that sound familiar? Does that seem familiar? And where might we find something that looks remarkably like verse 24? Also, remember? So it's the same verse but differently translated. Where is it? So, to all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms' atoms in all aspects, with supreme faith I pay homage. Yeah, it's going through the same thing. So one of the visualizations, because it's all visualization, isn't it? So on each atom, you imagine on each atom of the universe, there is a Buddha teaching with their surrounding Bodhisattva group, and so that's everywhere. So everything is marked with the Buddha teaching, if you like. It's a bit like sometimes the advice that I've heard has been given, somebody gets an initiation and they do a very elaborate mandala, and they get that, they can do all of that elaborate mandala, and then they say, okay, and now you do inside your heart, and in the drop of the heart, there's another equally elaborate mandala, and they go, oh. So they go away and they do that, and then this is the person I heard, they went back and said, oh, I can do that, and so the master, they sat together, and then the master said, okay, so now within the central deity's heart of that one, there's another mandala. And it seems to be partly about breaking down our concepts of stuff and solidity, but also it's that sense that Buddhas are everywhere. There's nowhere that a Buddha isn't here. And it comes back to the bathing ritual. We're kind of washing away our inability to see that, our inability to understand that there's enlightenment present all around, in a sense. But we don't see it because we're locked into our headspace. So that one metaphor for that, one way of presenting that is to say that in each atom there are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in their field. And then, in each atom of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in their field, there's more. The bathhouse thing that we were just doing, sorry, yeah. So that part of that is about purification of our own view. you know, washing away. And of course, then you say, well, of course, there's that phrase that Buddhas cannot wash away your sins. You know, they can only point. It's true, they can't. But these things are things to play with to help us remove our ignorance. So they're not real in that sense. They're metaphors. Sik ladak in Tibetan. You know, they point to something. They allude to something. What is that something? It's always going back to the Dharmakaya and the vibrancy and the spaciousness of the Dharmakaya. So this singing the eulogy, singing praises to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, or singing praises to their qualities, we haven't yet really got that in the West, but certainly in India there was clearly a tradition of singing praises, and there's a CD called Dharmanada where one of the current lamas asked some of the great Sanskrit singers to sing some of the old Buddhist Sanskrit songs, and they're very, very nice, very, very perfect, very beautiful.
I mean, quite a lot of the songs were about praising, plenty of Victorian hymns.
Sorry, I didn't mean within, I meant within Western Buddhism. We haven't got that yet. Within Christianity, there are beautiful, beautiful praises and songs. Yes, there's, yes, Stabat Mater can reduce me to tears done correctly, no problem. But we haven't got that yet. But if you can find little things just to hum to yourself or sing to yourself. I remember one time walking into the Rinpoche temple in Lhasa, and of course, when I went, it was about a year after you could actually do Buddhism again in Tibet openly. So I walked in, and I was the only person in the temple apart from the two monks who I knew, because I went there every day, and they attended to the Buddha statue that was in the main part of the Rinpoche, and that Buddha statue, during the Cultural Revolution, it had been smashed and cut in half, and so the bottom half ended up in Tibet, in Tibet, in a kind of scrap heap ready to be melted down, and the top half had ended up in Beijing to be melted down. So the one of the lamas found the two, put them together, put it back there, and when I walked in, there was only one of the attendants there, and he was just singing. They have a praise to the Buddha that they sing to the Buddha every day. And the look of devotion on his face was spectacular, just wow, so, so beautiful. And that feeling of emotion that something that had thought to have been lost was back with them. You could feel it. It was tangible energy around there. It was beautiful. But they also, interestingly enough, they because the one had been destroyed and they couldn't find it, when they were allowed to practice religion, they made a kind of clay image in the same shape. And when they found the original, they didn't kind of chuck the clay one, they put that one just in front of it so that you could see the Rinpoche Jo and then also the clay image as well. But I really understood that reason for singing praises to the Buddha, So, with this thing that we do, this, I don't know if anyone put it to a tune, but praising to Shakyamuni Buddha, it's worth doing somehow, It helps open the heart. It helps move things on a bit.
There's loads of research about benefits of singing, so, bringing those together. I mean, we can do things with stuff already, but some of the verses of...
Microphone. God, yes, it's good. If I have to sit in front of this camera, you can talk into the microphone, I tell you that. We share the suffering here.
But just loads of scientific research on the benefits of singing. So, if I walk past a Methodist church before flow, you can see the logic. It's very science,
Yeah.
spirituality. But there's loads of things we can adapt. I mean, some of the gospel songs work really well done.
Yeah. No, I would love to get hold of it, but apparently in the 1920s and 30s, some of the Japanese schools in America, they took the tunes for Christian hymns and they turned them into Buddhist hymns. So they took that, but I've not found the songbook for that, although occasionally I ask people if it's to be found. But I remember one time Geshe Tashi said to me that he wanted us to be more like a black church. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll go away and I'll come up with some kind of, I was playing a bit, and he wasn't that impressed with my effort, but Jesus loves me, this I know, and you all go, Jesus loves me, this I know, because the sutras tell me so, because the sutras tell me so. So we can do it, and particularly responsory type stuff that has a strong, well, my background, it's a Gallic way of singing. They still do that in the Isles. We can do it, but we just need time to work it through and play with it. And we do need to play. Yeah, we do need to play. Yeah. Okay, so if you can think of some good gospel singing, especially now the Queen of Gospel is gone, if someone has a good voice, then we can do that. But it should, if we took time, we should be able to produce something that's fun and beautiful. Okay, so that's it with offering. But also, if you look, it's mixed in, isn't it? So we've got the bodies as numerous atoms paying homage, and then this key verse, 26. Until the essence of enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddhas. Likewise, I go for refuge to the Dhamma and to the assembly of Bodhisattvas. So, at the end of all that, in the same way that we offer a mandala, then we take refuge. This is grandmother teaching, or teaching my grandmother to suck eggs, but because you guys know. But what's the key thing about refuge is external refuge and internal refuge, isn't it? And if you have to do only one, then internal refuge. So in other words, I go for refuge to the Buddhas means I go for refuge to the people who will help me outside, the people who showed this path, the people who taught all these things, who taught our teachers. And the Dharma is, again, we had this thing about text yesterday. Dharma is a book, This is Dharma, this is Shantideva's text in Tibetan. But at one stage, Shantideva spoke that on the throne. You remember that towards the end, he went up into the sky and then dematerialized, and then there was just the voice reciting the 10th chapter. But before that, there was text in his mind. And in the same way that with this, in this praise to Shakyamuni Buddha, where Lama Zopa Rinpoche has put in a couple of extra verses, after that, then when it says, do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly, this is the teaching of the Buddha. If we have that in our heads, and that's memorized, then we can use that in any situation. Whenever we're about to kick off or we're about to obsess, we can just pull ourselves back. So mental text is what saves us, in a sense. And the realization of the mental text is all very well to hold the words. It's like Avalokiteshvara is great compassion. So you can have the mental image of Avalokiteshvara, and you maybe have a very clear image, but unless the heart is going, then we're missing the point, aren't we? Because Avalokiteshvara comes in hundreds of different forms. There are at least 108 different forms of Avalokiteshvara. And if we know all of those forms, but we're not developing a broader compassion than the compassion, that limited one of, I'm compassionate with the people I like. And they're a rather small group of 30. And there's 8 billion people in the world. And then there's all the animals and all the rest of it. If it's just tight, small, narrow, then we're missing the point of doing those visualizations. So again, we go for refuge to the external Buddha, to their teachings, but their teachings come down to us having mental text. That when we realize that, then that becomes internal Dharma. When we realize that, we become Buddha ourselves. We become Bodhisattva ourselves. Then that's the internal refuge in the Buddha. Internal Dharma and internal Sangha. We become that group of people who see reality as it is. We stop believing all our hallucinations. Recently, Lama Zopa Rinpoche sent out a thing, I think it was on FPMT. You get kind of something every day, and he basically was telling his senior students off, going, your senior students, you should really have worked out by now that you're throwing all of this out. All these things you react to, all these things you get upset about, you're throwing it out. It's you doing it, and pushing it back onto us to look at ourselves, the way we behave, the way we externalize our internal dramas, and by becoming Sangha, internal Sangha, we become people who don't do that anymore. We see reality as it is in every given moment. I can't imagine what that's like, but it must be extraordinary, because it's nothing like my experience at all. So this external refuge, going for refuge to the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and really important actually. I know we have a very tolerant tradition and all the rest, and many people say they're Buddhist and they never took refuge, and say they're Buddhist and they don't believe in reincarnation and they don't believe in karma, but in the end, our tradition says you're not really a Buddhist until you stand up and go, yes, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. It's although it's an image that will probably upset a lot of people, but it's like coming out. I come out as a Buddhist. I'm not going to pretend I'm anything else. I'm going to say, this is what I am. And you have to, particularly in Mahayana Buddhism, with this development of great compassion, which is the precursor to Bodhicitta, that great compassion for all sentient beings, that requires more than one lifetime. I'm sorry. It just does. So there is reincarnation in the structure, if you like. Whether it's in reality, I don't know. But in the structure, Mahayana Buddhism requires a belief in future lives, a belief in past lives. Why in past lives? Because we are all massively different. We are all massively different. We have our own strengths and weaknesses. We have our own kind of obsessions and not. We're drawn to certain things. We're not drawn to other things. They're again, within the structure of Mahayana Buddhism, within the kind of intellectual structure, you have to have past and future lives. For that to be going on, there has to be the play of karma. Each moment of our mind is a product. It can also be the cause for something else, but each moment of our awareness is a product. Where does that come from? Previous causes. Products don't come from nothing. That's not the way it works in real life. So again, you have to have those things. I'm sorry, it's great that people are happy to be Buddhists and call themselves Buddhists, but we do need to kind of bite the bullet sometimes and take these things that are difficult, and they are difficult in our culture. Buddhism is heresy in one sense, but the idea of reincarnation was firmly dealt with in the kind of 4th century AD, but it keeps on popping up in our Western Christian culture. That going for refuge is so important. So I would like you to spend a little time, if you don't mind, just doing that, just taking that going for refuge take that verse and just think on it. Think, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for me? What does going for refuge mean for me? In terms of not only why, but what does that mean in terms of my behavior, all of that? Starting to just think. We have a tendency to, I have a tendency, you probably don't, but we because the way the Lamrim is structured, refuge comes quite early. And it comes at the end of the lower scope. There is a Mahayana refuge. Refuge, we get that mind of, I did that, I've done that. But But it's the most core practice, actually. Without that, then it's not working. You know what I mean? So that sense that this being and these beings have given us something incredibly profound, and that we're going to work with what they've given us and trust in them, have confidence in them, have conviction in what they have given as a kind of working hypothesis, that Dharma that they've given us to transform our minds, to change our minds, and then the beings who embody that. The monastic Sangha is one group, but also our fellow lay practitioners, people who help us on the path, people who don't block us from the path. And if you want to be really broad about that, it's also all the people who are really, really annoying, because patience is one of the 6 perfections, isn't it? If we didn't have annoying people, irritating people, people who really, then we'd never develop that. We'd never develop that patience. So it can be all beings. Beings who help us, beings who don't particularly help us, beings who really, really get on our nerves. All of them we can turn into help to move towards that. So maybe just sit for a little while, think about what it means to go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. Thank you. So we'll go into the next meditation. Which is to focus on verse 10 and 11 in the second chapter, which is the beginning of the bathing house sequence. I've actually forgotten the rest of it, but a friend of mine, they tried to sort of Buddha-size that gospel song, "Oh Happy Day," you know? Oh happy day, oh happy day, oh happy day, oh happy day. When Buddha washed, when Buddha washed, when Buddha washed, when Buddha washed, my sins away, my sins away. So I can't remember what they did with the rest of it, but it worked. It worked quite nicely. Okay, so be creative in this. You know, it's set something. The idea is you set something up, and then you invite them in, and then you. It's just you give a beautiful time. You can work through the stages in the text if you want, or otherwise just let it go. You know, washing, goddesses washing, beautiful smells, sights, sounds, everything uplifting and bright and beautiful, in whatever kind of bathroom you want, whether it's Victoria Plum or something else, you know. But just invite the Buddhas, and I suppose I can't think of anything you'd actually do, but it's that kind of respectfulness that you have, and that joy in serving also needs to kind of come in there, just to make it light, bright, and beautiful. So we'll do that for about 10 minutes or so. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So, if someone would like to start into the confession from 27 through to 39, it's quite a large chunk. Anyone willing to read that out?
Is there a difference between these two texts?
In theory, no. In practice, they may well have been done at 2-year interval or something, and somebody's refined the translation. One of the problems with a lot of the stuff that's happened in this course and the master's program is that they've been refined over the years as people actually understand what the text is about. And of course, then you forget to go back and change the thing further down the line, so it becomes a problem. But yeah, I mean, from my own experience here, I know that thing of, you do something and then later on it gets changed, then you forget to change it in the original. But they should, I mean, that's where the verse numbering is important, because it will point you towards the same thing. And similarly, if you look at the translations in English, sometimes they're really very different. And sometimes that's a matter of looking at when the translation was produced. I have a translation of this text by Barnett, L.D. Barnett, from 1909, which is really quite difficult to work with. And then, as I grew up in Buddhism, the first thing that I remember is Stephen Batchelor's translation, and that remained for a while the one that you saw, and then now the latest one that everybody says is wonderful is Pemmicarra's translation, and they're all very nice, and Pemmicarra's translation does read very well. But if you really want to look at this text in detail, you need to get about 5 or 6 translations and just work through. But because, particularly with verse, it is very hard to translate verse, because the levels of meaning that come with each, even within European languages, the levels of meaning are so intense in verse that you end up going for half the semantic range. You have a word that means this kind of stuff in English, and then in French, there's a kind of partial match, but it means kind of this and that. And it's very hard, and depending how you choose your terminology, you can start to shift the meaning of the text quite quickly. One of the things I noticed early on here, just a minor thing, but the first verse of chapter 2, in order to uphold that precious mind, well, it's not really in order to uphold, it's what you're doing is you're making excellent offerings to the Tathagatas, because that enables you to take up the mind of bodhicitta. So you're offering these causes in order to give you the power, the spiritual merit to take up that mind, to have the guts to take up that mind of bodhicitta. And for me, in order to uphold that precious mind, doesn't carry that, So but again, for others it will, and also we're all working slowly. These things get better each iteration. Every time Lama Tsongkhapa Institute goes through another master's program or another basic program, these texts get looked at again, and people go, maybe that can be expressed differently.
Alan Wallace's translation, he did with his wife Vesta, and
Yeah.
there's footnotes about why they translate.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen any translation that I thought, oh, that's horrible, you shouldn't use that. But they all have their own flavors, definitely. They all, and maybe it's just me, I have no problem with different translations, as long as they, particularly with this text, as long as they inspire. That's the point of this thing. We can make lots of comparisons, but in the end, it must inspire us. And in this situation, it must inspire us to have the guts to go, okay, I'll try for this thing called bodhicitta and fall flat on my face for the next minute, but I'll get up again and walk on, you know. That's the point of this text. Yeah. No, because I don't really understand Tibetan either. I mean, all my secrets coming out now, aren't they? I mean, one of the things I do, like with the praise to Shakyamuni Buddha, for instance, I recite that in the Tibetan, and I do other things in Tibetan, partly because Lama Zopa has this habit of every 2 or 3 years revising the English translations and adding. And what I've discovered is my mind is quite stiff, so if I've memorized something, to then re-memorize it with the changes, I find really hard. And then I end up not having it at all in my head, whereas the Tibetan doesn't change. So that's what I do, but it's laziness. But I mean, I really noticed that when he's, like with this daily prayer that he's asked us to do, he's changed that a couple of times, and I've given up trying to memorize it because somehow it doesn't work. But the mantras I can memorize because they don't change. And it's not that what he's doing is wrong, or because often, particularly the last set of revisions, have really added richness to it. But I just can't, because the other bit's kind of half in there, I can't sweep that out and put the new one in. It's my mental problem, you know. Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. Okay. So, actually, it's now lunchtime, so skip confession till after lunch. So, the food offering prayer, please, and if someone hasn't got any of them, please share it with your next door neighbor. Om Ah Hum, Om Ah Hum, Om Ah Hum. To the precious Buddha, peerless guide. To the precious Dharma, peerless refuge. To the precious Sangha, peerless liberators, we offer to the 3 jewels of refuge. This food with 100 flavors, attractive and well prepared, is offered to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas with devotion. May all beings enjoy the wealth of the food of concentration. Seeing this food as medicine, we eat it without attachment or hatred, not out of avarice, pride, or a wish for an enviable body, only to sustain the body. That's it. Thank you so much. So an hour and a half for lunch, and I don't think the cafe is open, but if no. So then it's out into the big wide world, and unfortunately, the Polish restaurant Mamushka seems to have vanished. But there are plenty other places. There's a nice Muslim place that does very cheap rice and dal.
That's where we're going.
And if you want to do that, you put a tag on Steve and you follow him. But I think I'm going to go down there as well. I think it's under $5 for a plate of rice and dal. Or you can get various kinds of dead animal as well, because they're good Muslim people. And other, there's plenty to eat around here. But if vegetarian is a little difficult quite a lot of the time. But please hack in. So if anyone wants to go to the Muslim place, then I'll be in the foyer in 5 minutes' time, post-we. Oh, God, I have that on. No, stupid boy.